So we've been looking at B2B commerce platforms, and in particular, what the right path would be for a B2B organization that needed to move to e-commerce. We've broken this up into various phases. Do you want to describe to me what our recommendations would be to a B2B organization that had either paper-based or very minimal digital capabilities when it comes to selling, and who needed to very rapidly get into providing digital services for their customers?
So obviously the first step, if you don't have anything at all, is to get yourself online. So that would be setting up as quickly as possible a transactional order portal where you can, where your customers can create orders and you can send them from there to your ERP and process them. So that's the very basics, just getting orders from that offline process into an online process. You probably want to start with your long tail of smaller customers. Which means that because they will probably eat up a lot of time of your sales reps, and you can free that time and allow them to focus on the tier 1 customers instead, and give these long tail customers a much better experience than they're currently getting because there isn't much time for them. So that would be the first step.
Because what I'm interested in as well is one of the challenges of bringing a commerce platform, a digital commerce platform to B2B is that typically you sell through sales people, and that can often be seen as an attempt to replace them, and that can be a problem. So Case, do you have any advice on how to handle the fact that you already have these existing sales channels and accounts working with sales people?
Yeah, it's super important that from the get-go you involve these people, and it's not only to avoid annihilating them from your process and your digital transformation activities, but it's also because they have a lot of valuable information about where you should focus your order portal efforts on, because the intent is not to replace them. The intent is to automate the 80% of their time that they probably spend on say 20% of the revenue in terms of long tail customers and long tail products that are quite boring and quite labor intensive and also quite error prone, and so that they can focus all their time on those 20% of the deals with the big clients, the important clients, that where they really make the difference, and also extend that. So definitely the very first order portal is almost always about the long tail, so the consumables, the spare parts, whatever your business is. That differs, of course. But those things are just annoying for salespeople, and if they make a mistake, it's even more annoying. Just to handle all of that by phone makes their life miserable. So if you explain that well, and also evolve them to actually define what that part is, what you can best focus on for your first order portal, that you have a big win on both sides.
Okay, so it's I guess when you say looking at the long tail, it's partly because often those are simpler orders to take as well. You get often more complex orders that might need configuration, or there's a lot of
Exactly. It's not necessarily small orders, but it's simple orders. So it could be big amounts and even big carts, like with thousands of different products. But it's continuously the same thing every week again, and it's very, very easy, because it is rather boring, to make mistakes in that. Like, oh yeah, that's almost the same order as last week, copy paste, and you forget to copy paste one thing, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's that repetitive process. I mean, that is in quite a lot of companies still done by email, Excel sheets, and yeah, it's quite easy to mess that up.
So Emma, you mentioned you both mentioned reliability. Are there any other benefits for a transactional order portal? I'm thinking, for example, it's on 24/7, for example. So I know one of the things we see talking to customers is when they get to place orders, they want to be able to place orders in the middle of the night, for example. Can you think of any others, or if an organization was saying, okay, we need to put this order portal in place, what are some of the key features that they'll need to focus on?
Well, in terms of benefits, with your first question, of course, yeah, there's the reliability. You can automate a lot of things, the listing of your products, the ordering. You can automate integrations to your backend system, so you don't have any mistakes there. So yeah, you reduce the amount of mistakes. You also reduce the workload. We already talked about that, of course. You can, as you said, your customers can always access this platform, and you can also be more transparent about, your, for example, product information, that kind of thing. You can make sure that everybody gets the same information, rather than every sales rep giving a different story about certain things. So yeah, you just you save time and cost. I think the main benefits.
To add to that, I mean, you see, really, of course, it always sounds nice on paper, 24/7, and then your first thought may be like, why would I mean, I'm not going to order in the middle of the night, but there are actually quite a few branches in B2B, like the hospitality industry, where people just have very weird time shifts, and if you work in a kitchen and you still have to order your supplies, I mean, that's not going to happen in prime time. So it's very convenient that you can do that in off hours and even after your shift at midnight, indeed.
So assuming that someone has managed to put this order taking flow in place, and they said, okay, we want to go a step further than that. What would you say? What generally is the right next level of functionality, or the next kind of expansions that a B2B business would want to do?
I think indeed, if you have taken that first step and you have a functioning order portal, the next step is always to look at, okay, what can we do in terms of self-service to further lessen the burden on our sales managers and our service desk. Because one thing is taking orders, but another thing that takes a lot of time is following up invoices, the checking that whether things have gone out or not, what the status of an order is, etc., etc. So if you can extend your order portal to a real self-service portal, where people can look up their past orders, can see the status of the order, which items have been delivered, which may have been delayed, whether it's paid or not, what their credit status is, all these kind of things you can make available in a self-service portal, downloading your invoices. So you really can then move to a zero-touch order situation where you don't have anything to deal with anymore with these long tail orders.
And adding to that, this is not just beneficial for the retailer, but it's also beneficial for the customers, of course. As we said before, this is something that's always open. So if you have a question, you don't have to wait till customer service is open. You can just check it yourself. It also saves them time, because if you can set up an automated reorder or subscription kind of thing, then you don't have to go in every week to order the same stuff. So there's benefits on both sides.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Once you, what I have seen a lot in B2B is once you get into those areas of larger management of your account, you also start to have more price flexibility and price variations as well. There's often customer specific pricing or volume pricing. Emma, do you have any feelings about how you should incorporate those sort of price variations, or is it sensible to incorporate those price variations in a platform like this? I've also noticed that historically there isn't always a lot of clean structure around how that pricing is done, and sometimes it can be quite a manual process. Yeah,
so it definitely makes sense to include that, because this is a way you can serve your customers and differentiate between them. But yeah, as you said, historically it's often grown that every sales rep had the ability to create spreadsheets with separate pricing for every client. So you got a complete jungle of different prices. And that is something, of course, that's difficult to reproduce in a automated platform, but it's also not something that you might want to reproduce. You can see this is an opportunity to clean up and to create more structure in your pricing and more clarity. And then it's definitely something you want to include in your order portal.
Yeah, we've seen examples where in big multinationals they did a thorough analysis of all these pricing models that were floating around, and they discovered that with one and the same customer, they had hundreds of different price agreements for different people within that company. So it can be really daunting task indeed to automate that. It's possible, but as Emma said, you probably don't want it, and you want to streamline it a little bit. So it's a good opportunity as well to do that.
Another advantage of using a portal for this is that you can use analytics and see which prices actually work. So you can optimize. In the past it was just maybe we just have all these prices in Excel sheets. You have no visibility, no control. If you have a transactional order portal, you can see and you can experiment.
Okay, now we want to go from maintaining from the what we could call the basics or the fundamentals, and go and take it to the next level and try and really do things that are improvements. Typically, how would someone go about that, Emma, and what sort of areas would people look for improvements in?
Well, there's two areas really where you can focus. You can focus on your own sort of back-end processes and try to make those much more flexible, because quite often they are controlled by what your ERP can do rather than by what makes most business sense. And the second area is the customer experience, how you can improve that. And of course, these things work together. If you have more flexible processes in the back end, you tend to have a better customer experience as well, because you can adapt your processes to what your customers need. So examples of that is allowing your customers to choose delivery time or delivery slots, giving them much more visibility on inventory. You might consider implementing some sort of order management functionality or an order management system to handle allocation, to make that as efficient as possible, allowing for order modifications, handling, for example, B2B to C, so drop shipment and returns on that. So there's a lot of things you can do to be a more advanced, more flexible, more modern business.
Yeah, to add to that, order management is by now in B2C quite a normal subject of discussion, at least. Not everybody has one and not everybody needs one, but if your order streams and fulfillment streams are slightly more complex than the bare minimum, it becomes very beneficial. In B2B, since B2B is a bit lacking in their development, in their digital maturity, it is not yet a big topic, but I expect that to become a big topic over the coming years. You see already more and more changes in B2B, like instead of shipping one truck to a main warehouse once a week, customers start to demand delivery to all of their shops or venues spread over the country on a daily basis. And then your order management process becomes more and more complex, and especially if you also start allowing, for instance, drop shipping to end customers, depending again on what your product is, of course. But that is a possibility that is offered for a lot of our customers. What you see there is, yes, it becomes more complex, and you definitely will need order management at some point, and whether that's a component in your ERP or a separate system, that remains to be seen. But you have to be also very careful in choosing your topics, so to say. So a nice example is the delivery to individual warehouses. Great. I mean, if my client says, I want you to deliver in my 20 warehouses instead of my main warehouse only, so that I don't have to do the redistribution. Okay, that's something you can discuss and price. But if they say, I want next day delivery because that's what I'm used from Amazon, there's a good argument in that to challenge that, because do you really need that? Is that not just something because everybody has it? Isn't it much more important that you have super predictable and reliable and on-time delivery? Do you really prefer next day delivery, or do you say next Friday is fine, but I want it between 12 and 2 because then my crew is available to unpack it? So there's quite a lot of expectations from B2C that are not necessarily directly translating to B2B. You read in every single article about B2B commerce, like, oh yeah, it's just like, it should be like B2C because every B2B order customer is actually a B2C customer when they're at home. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean that you have to, for instance, focus on the exact same rich product experience. You don't have to lure them into buying and not moving to their next shop. No, they are your customers, you know them. You have to deliver what is real value to them. You have to focus on that.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It's also in a very consumer way. Amazon doesn't have next day delivery for all products all of the time, of course. So it's really
Exactly.
a consumer marketing position. Some of our products, some of the time. But that's really interesting what you say, Emma. I'm curious then, because typically with consumer, there's a well-known set of consumer experience expectations that you can improve and develop features to, and a methodology for doing so. But if you're looking to say improve your customer experience in B2B, it's not about say graphic design tweaks and adjustments that will make it look better necessarily. It's probably about identifying specific tasks that are going to benefit your customers. What would be, and you could quite easily see that inside a business, you're probably going to have 50 of those on a list. There's going to be different people saying, I'd like this, I'd like that. So what process would someone use to identify the right ones and then make sure that they are the right ones?
Well, in B2B, you have the big advantage you can actually talk to your customers, whereas in B2C, they're unknown and you have to guess what they're doing using analytics and experiments. So that's a big advantage in B2B. So something we would recommend is to hold a discovery workshop where you gather, you gather your various requirements and then you investigate them. One by one, say, okay, what does this actually add? What's it going to cost? Who wants it? And in that way, you can prioritize them and decide on the ones that add the most value for your business. Because the domain is so large, and it really depends per client what the best steps are. You can't give a one-size-fits-all answer. You really have to look at a specific business.
Yeah, it can be really, really surprising what comes out of a workshop with the customers and your client, your B2B client in one room. For all of the group, the outcome is sometimes really surprising. Like, oh, really? Is that important to you?
Yeah, I spent quite a lot of time working on some global platforms, but then going to the markets to make sure that we're building the right thing. And I found that talking to the sales teams was an extremely good idea. Usually, because they were working with customers on a daily basis, so they came up with a great set of needs that were quite pragmatic, and they could tell you what they were wasting their time with as well. It was also a good way to get the sales teams on board because you're asking them, what would you like out of this? How do you want to work with it? And then lastly, also then when we develop prototypes, they could then take them directly to their customers and show them and get feedback. So they were going out and they were extending our testing capability as well. So they became absolutely key allies in doing this. And they were also, salespeople tend to be quite effusive. They tend to have a lot to say, that kind of personality. So they can bring a lot of energy to a project as well. Kees, I'm curious, I know it's a very difficult thing to do, but if someone is looking at this going, wow, I like all of this, but I'm looking at climbing a mountain, what sort of timing and resources, but particularly timing and effort is someone looking at to go through these steps, in particular the transactional order portal and maybe self-service?
Yes, so these used to be always super complex projects and running over months or even years to get a proper shop set up. Times have changed in that respect, partly and mainly due to technological improvements. You have platforms these days that you can roll out of the box within weeks rather than months, and also due to the whole COVID situation, the need for digital transformation has become even more apparent. I mean, you just can't survive these days without an order portal, basically. And that has also given another boost to the speed in those processes. Like, how can we start as soon as possible? How can we really get our first order in as soon as possible? The pure focus on that, like keep your minimum viable products as minimal as possible, keep your first release as minimal as possible, just make sure that you can get orders in, has brought it down to about 5 weeks and 100K, where you can have an order portal running up for within 5 weeks and for the first operated for the first year. So it is really the barrier to entry has been lowered tremendously over the last couple of years.